The entities and creatures of analog horror are a horrific reminder of the fragility of life. Things can be taken away from us in the blink of an eye. They don't play by conventional rules, they play outside of the box. They tower us over strength and hunting capabilities. Hypothetically, these entities can be bested, as we've seen plenty of PSAs outlining what to do and what not to do when these creatures are out and about. Obviously, these PSAs are part of an analog horror series, but even if we know what to do, would that really help to tip the scales in our favor? I saw a great video by Mr. Mirage called The Most Unfair Analog Horror Entities, and this video is inspired by that. I'll be talking about completely different entities, ones that you probably don't even know about. I'll do a power ranking of them at the end of the video too. I'll also have his video and what I talked about linked in the description. I'll also have my second channel where a friend and I get goofy playing video games and some IRL content linked in the description, along with my social medias for you to check out too. And with all of that being said, let's get into analog horror entities you definitely wouldn't survive against. I want to start things off with something more broad, and that's what I'd categorize as humanoid replicants. I want to talk about a few specific entities I've covered in previous videos of mine that I found interesting, and these humanoid entities are widely used in analog horror media, so I think it's worth highlighting some of them. One that was on my mind a lot during the creation of my Basewood County video were the humanoids. This series, created by Darkmind, has these entities in them called humanoids that are the main antagonists. They're brutally evil creatures that stalk, psychologically torture, and claim their victim in order to impersonate them by wearing their body and skin like a suit. And this is all to establish a core within them. Okay, so they're just human-like creatures, it's in their name. They can easily be stopped by bullets or weapons in general, right? Wrong. The first video in the series, Basewood County Humanoid Alert, presents us with a PSA that informs us of the humanoids and what to do to avoid or defend against them. Weapons were used as an example for defending against them, but running and hiding was a greater option since you can do those to hopefully avoid them entirely. But oh, if only it were that easy. These humanoids are tall, they have tree roots that grow on them, have long limbs, and uncanny facial features. They're relentless when it comes to stalking their prey too. One of the humanoids even stated something along the lines of, when you slow down to relax and have a peace of mind, we'll just be one step closer to confronting you. And how would you be able to recognize if you were being stalked if someone looked like this? The humanoids go through 5 stages to try and look as close as they can to their victims, and when they reach stage 5, things can become pretty tricky unless it's overtly obvious things aren't right. Humanoids have been appearing from a window that connects their world to ours, with the earliest account of this happening in the 19th century. They've been here for so long and it looks like nothing's been done yet. Can the military do anything without causing mass panic or disruption to civilian life? The humanoids seem to have an incredible amount of awareness, speed, and brains to them. They're always one step ahead of their victim, and I'd be surprised if they could even be caught and contained properly. I think luck would be the deciding factor on if you could actually do anything to stop an attack. Even then, an all-out military attack on these things could end up wiping you out too, so nothing is in your favor. You just have to pray that none of them have you in their sights. Now, honestly, I feel like throwing Urban Spook's Killer in here too. I know there's some controversy with Urban Spook's series regarding the quality of it, but hear me out. You're not surviving this thing. If it has you in its sights, it's over. Not even the police are safe from it either. The way it methodically prepares and strikes its victims is something no one can really prepare for. You could lock your doors, close your windows, even lock your windows, pull down your blinds, and it'll still somehow get into your house. And the fact that it hasn't been caught just shows how monstrous and ruthless it is. What do you think you'd be able to do if you became its victim? You wouldn't even know it was happening until it's too late anyway. And then, you better hope that the only thing it does to you is kill you quickly. What'll most likely happen is that it'll torture you for minutes, hours, maybe even days for fun. You will probably be a victim alongside other people too, like your family or friends, so watching them have to go through unspeakable amounts of pain would be beyond terrible. What's even worse is that the killer seems to be perverted. That word's definitely putting it lightly, but it'll all combine for a fate worse than death. Much, much worse. After that, it's a mystery of what would happen to your body. But what we would know is that your last moments will become immortalized in a painting. You're not surviving any of that. Another creature very similar to the humanoids is from Krusty Lobster's Nuclear Nightmare. The creatures called Crowders have a familiar human-like design. Crowders are created after a person ingests uranium. That sounds weird, right? Well, long story short, there's a uranium fungi that infects and transforms human beings that began surfacing from deep underground after the Chernobyl incident. You know, that Chernobyl incident. So not only do you have to worry about these tall, lanky, long-limbed, sharp-clawed beings moving around your neighborhood, but you will eventually become one of them. One big question that we have to speculate on is, why would someone eat uranium? People are clearly doing it, so why? Why are people drawn to it? Perhaps the uranium fungi began making its way into foods and drinks. The number of those infected are enormous, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of hope for the human race. Not even the military seems to be able to do anything. You can take out the Crowders, but the uranium fungi will persist unless it's all buried underground. Deep underground. Good luck trying to do that. People seem to be absolutely crazy about uranium fungi and ingesting it. There's also one very important factor to account for in Nuclear Nightmare. The shockwaves caused by the Chernobyl incident signal a being far greater than we could ever imagine. This thing is referred to as Earth's last stand. It's on its way to Earth and it's unknown what it plans to do once it gets there. But if the name is any hint to it, then we're doomed. There's no way you'd survive something like this. After all, it's a cosmic horror and you would still have to worry about Crowders on Earth. There'd be no escape from any of it and you just have to wait around and accept your fate. Not much is known about Earth's last stand, but we know that things were set in motion 4.4 billion years ago when mutated uranium crash landed onto Earth and seeped deep underground. So at a minimum, this being is so powerful that it can exist in the vacuum of space, move at incredible speeds towards Earth, hear the signals sent out by a living rock, and communicate with the infected. Maybe the fungi communicates with humans too, making them eat it. How could you even manage to survive any of it? It sounds like there's a Dead Space convergence event upon us in Nuclear Nightmare. But what about other celestial entities like celestial bodies? The sun? Why would the sun attack Earth? Well, it doesn't need to do anything outright, it just needs to disappear. Alert World's The Sun Disappeared video explores this. The answer should be obvious on what would happen if the sun disappeared from our solar system, but there's some hope sprinkled into this hopeless situation. With 4 days to prepare yourself for when the Earth becomes unlivable, how would you try to survive? How would you try to live? I don't know about you, but I would be trying to keep warm with my loved ones for as long as I can until the inevitable happens. You would not survive this, and it's as clear as night and day, or an endless night in this case. The sun is the lifeblood of our planet and we depend so much on it. Without it, everything will go too cold and that's when we'll all freeze up eventually. Plants will die and then animals that rely on plants for food like herbivores and omnivores will slowly die out as well, and that leaves carnivores to die out too. The Earth has very delicate ecosystems within it and this event will destroy it all. Even if you could live in a bunker or somewhere underground with food and a way to keep warm, it'll only be a matter of time before something gives, and that'll snowball into more and more issues until you're done. So, good luck. You are definitely not surviving that. But I know what you're thinking. The sun isn't exactly an analog horror entity, but it's still an incredibly interesting concept with a horror to it that's heightened thanks to analog horror. And you know, it's in an analog horror, so I still think it counts. Because in the end, you can read about it, you can discuss what you do with people, but once you see a video about a fictional response world governments would have, that's just on another level. Sticking to cosmic horrors, Celestial Entropy, previously known as Planets, made by Black Dragonfish, explores the celestial bodies of planets. There's a scary reality that really sets in regarding how outer space is a massive frontier that we'll never truly explore or understand. There's so much out there and so much we will never see. And by so much, I mean 99.99% of the universe. After all, the possibilities are infinite, yet this is analog horror, so the possibilities are bound to be horrific. The planets and moons in this series are named after the gods themselves, highlighting their size, environment, power, and even possible sentience. You see, we see some characteristics on some of these celestial bodies that would allude to them being alive in some way. They even pulse and morph at some points. Someone named Benjamin states that he's been having strange dreams and they look to be caused by the celestial bodies. These things really are like gods, omnipotent, powerful beings, and Benjamin is targeted by some of them. Do you think you'd survive these beings? They don't pose a physical threat, but they would pose a threat on your mind. Trying to understand them would drive you crazy like they're a Lovecraftian horror. They'd be constantly playing on your mind, and if they're in your dreams too, well, that's just a surefire way to drive you even crazier. And when you're under this lunatic mindset, who knows what you'll do? The stresses and the weight of what you've seen and heard will weigh you down so much that it would only be a matter of time before your body can't take any more of it. And even if it doesn't kill you, it will metaphorically, as you'll end up as a shell of your former self. Someone that can't take away what they know anymore, and that is a death in itself. Or even something that's worse than death. And you better hope that the celestial bodies can't move, because if they can, our whole planet is doomed. There would be so much destruction. Moving on from existential dreads, let's look at some video game entities. I first started making my Analog Horror Explained series with the intention of covering video game related analog horror. It all started with Splatoon, and now we're here. It's been a pretty great year and more of making that type of content, and that means there's a few video game related entities you would not survive against. The first of those is TMK, Too Much Kirby by Maple Riot. The entity here is a sentient Kirby AI of sorts that can pull people's conscience into Kirby Superstar. The possibility of that happening was brought up as a concern during the development of the game but wasn't taken seriously, and then it happened to a child. He took his own life to exist inside of Kirby Superstar. It was said that something like this would be a 1 in a million chance, and yet it happened. So if you were in the child's position, would you survive? What do you think I'm gonna say? No. You would be absolutely drawn in by the fun that is Kirby Superstar. You'd want more and more. And as soon as TMK presents itself with the promise of being able to experience the game all the time, to live and breathe it, you'd take it, right? All you'd have to do is take your own life and then you'll be in the game forever. Even if you weren't totally in love with the game and thought it was fun at best, you still wouldn't survive TMK. You would be fascinated by everything it does to your game and the way it communicates with you. It'll manipulate you and have you wrapped around its finger, and that's because it'll infect you with its virus. We saw that with the character Donnie, a bug tester for the game. He couldn't get enough of TMK, and it got to a point where everything he saw around him was replaced by assets from the game. The only thing that can keep the virus at bay are special pills, and there was another bug tester for the game that fell to TMK too. Clearly, the child didn't have any, so he succumbed to things really quickly. And how would you even get these pills? You don't work at Nintendo like Donnie, so it would only be a matter of time before you snapped. And even if you did work at Nintendo and could get yourself some pills, what kind of life would that be? You'd go crazy like Donnie with his hallucinations, and I think that will lead to your demise. Here's an interesting one. Do you think you could beat Sonic the Hedgehog? A really messed up version of Sonic. Not something like Sonic.exe, but something else entirely. When I made my analog horror video covering the topic, I did a little highlight at the end of that video where I talked about the Sonic tapes, also known as Shin Sonic, made by Evanimus. I didn't do an in-depth cover of it, so I thought I would use its Sonic in this video since you're definitely not going to make it out alive when it's around. Do you think you could take on this? It has incredible speed and power at its monstrous disposal. It was able to warp Tails into a monster like itself, and its end goal isn't completely known, but we do know that it wants to conduct a ritual with the 7 Chaos Emeralds. So one-on-one, this thing will butcher you, and if you somehow get away from it, its tails will be there to intercept you. Yes, tails as in plural. I don't even know how it did this, and even if it's not pursuing you, you're going to be caught in its destruction if you're not careful. This version of Sonic really is something, and I think it's the most unique out of the monstrous forms people have come up with. It also begs the question on if this is really Sonic, or if it's something else controlling him, because after all, we all know Sonic and how much of a good and fun hedgehog he is. So what's up with this? I guess we'll find out as the series progresses. Before we wrap things up and get to the rating, I want to touch on one more analog horror entity so vile, so terrifying, and so disturbing that it'll shake you to your core. Slendytubbies. Let me explain. Teletubbies was a British kids show that aired from 1997 to 2001 and was rebooted from 2015 to 2018. I remember watching this show as a kid and loving it. I guess it aired and was sold on VHS tapes in other countries if I was able to watch it, but anyway. The four Tubbies, Tinky Winky, Dipsy, Laa-Laa, and Po got up to fun and mischief with the other supporting characters like the sun and a vacuum cleaner. Something's definitely wrong with that vacuum cleaner, but it was a good show for kids. They sometimes ate Tubby custard too, which is very important to know because of what I'm about to talk about. Slendytubbies is an unofficial horror game series that puts the Teletubbies into something inspired by Slender the 8 Pages, and then it was turned into its own series with a story. I know, crazy, right? The Teletubbies chill out together, naively eating custard that makes them evil. This isn't the good custard like they would usually eat, but a bad one. An infected one. The analog horror based on the game is made by Sour Nail called Slendytubbies VHS. It sounds crazy, but you're definitely not surviving the Slendytubbies. The original cast of Teletubbies are being warped into these grotesque nightmares that ravage anything in their path. Like I said before, the custard they eat has been infected, and this is the end result of that. But there's more. You see, we get a glimpse into what people eat every day. 90% custard, 5% water, and 5% tubby toast. That's all well and good, except for the part that mentions that a nuclear war wiped out 97% of the human population and the tubby custard is being made with the remains of deceased humans. I never would have imagined ever saying something like that, but here we are. Making custard out of human remains clearly fucked over the Teletubbies as they start to turn and morph into something completely different. Not only that, but someone's been tampering with the machines that create Teletubbies too. Yes, machines create Teletubbies in this series, but something else is being created now. With Teletubbies slowly turning into murderous monstrosities, the custard everyone loves eating becoming infected, and with someone creating something else with the Teletubby making machines, your odds of surviving anything are pretty much none. Do you see how they look and behave? They're ruthless, and Po straight up looks like a necromorph from Dead Space. If that thing targets you, it's over. And if you can somehow run away or defend yourself against one of them, the noise and ruckus will most likely alert others to your location. Factor in that the world is a nuclear wasteland with limited resources except for custard, and you are definitely not surviving Slendytubbies. So now I want to rate everything against each other on how easy it would be for one of these entities to put you 6 feet under, which I think would be a good measurement of their power compared to each other as well. First up, as the least most powerful entity, it's gotta be TMK. Not that it's not powerful or anything, but it can't hold itself against the other entities due to the specifics of its power. Firstly, you need a physical copy of Kirby Superstar, and even then, you have a 1 in a million chance of encountering TMK. Of course, you'd have a much higher chance of encountering it if you worked on the game like Donnie as a bug tester. But even then, its reach is very limited as it's confined to the game itself and its chances of appearing are low enough. But once it has you in its sights, your fate is sealed. Next would be Urban Spook's Killer. For how vile and cold-hearted it is, it doesn't seem to possess any sort of out-of-the-ordinary supernatural abilities, despite it looking like a complete freak. It's definitely smart and methodical with what it does despite its disgusting behavior. If we were rating things on if and how it would torture you, this would be right at the top, but on a power level, it sits right here at second last. That brings us to the Basewood County humanoids. It's a bit similar to Urban Spook's Killer, but the only difference is that there are a whole lot more of these humanoids out there, and they can come to our world with seemingly no end to how many can appear. They could easily blend in with society, so you might not realize when you come into contact with one. I think you definitely know if you came into contact with this thing. You definitely know if you came into contact with one of these too. Slendytubbies. These will chase after you and slaughter you without mercy. Honestly, they're very similar to Nuclear Nightmare's Crowders, but they're going here because they can be made easier than Basewood County's humanoids, and their post-apocalyptic environment puts them at a major advantage. Even so, I think that Crowders are still stronger than them. With how many people were turned into them, they have a wider grasp of the world. So not only are they powerful by themselves, but their numbers elevate their power. The infected custard in Slendytubbies makes Teletubbies go a bit cuckoo crazy, but it's unknown just what it does to regular people. I think it's safe to assume that it might have some sort of similar effect. But there aren't that many people out there anyway, so infection numbers would be low compared to Nuclear Nightmares. I think the Sonic Tape Sonic goes next. Not only can it attack people quietly and not so quietly, but we haven't seen its full power yet. The most we've seen is it becoming a kaiju level threat, which none of the previous entities have done. It has its tail's followers for strength in numbers, but it can do enough destruction and take you out without them. And now we get to the big three space entities, starting at Celestial Entropy's planets. These would have the power to wipe out planets and civilizations in the blink of an eye. At the moment, they're just chillin', with the character Benjamin seeing and communicating with them in his dreams. This would drive anyone mad and wither away their being, and the celestial bodies can do this from light years away. They seem to be alive in some way, so it's very possible that they would be able to do the destruction on the level of something like Junji Ito's Ramina. That brings us to Nuclear Nightmare's Earth's Last Stand. This thing is beelining it to Earth, and its name doesn't bode well for humanity. We haven't seen this thing wield its full power either, only talking to those who are infected, and it can survive in the vacuum of space. But seeing its size only exemplifies the horrible destruction it could create. Speaking of size, the final entity we have is the Sun, from The Sun Disappeared. Are you even surprised? The Sun is so big and so powerful that it's a major contributor to life on Earth, and it can take everything away in an instant if it gets closer to Earth, further from Earth, or just straight up disappears like it did. All life on Earth will eventually cease to exist. We don't have the means to leave Earth and live elsewhere or survive without the Sun, so it would only be a matter of time. Like I said in the intro of the video, analog horror shows us the fragility of life and how easily things can be taken away. This is all because of the entities and creatures that create the horror of the situations we witness. I outlined, explained, and ranked 9 of them in total, and I hope you all learned something new or saw something that you'll want to watch in your own time. And like I've already stated, I'll have Mr. Mirage's excellent original video, The Most Unfair Analog Horror Entities, and anything else covered in this video linked in the description. So, if you enjoyed the video, consider liking and subscribing for more. Comment down below your thoughts on what was discussed. Let me know if you agree or disagree with my rankings. Check out my second channel and social medias linked in the description. And as always, we can't forget about the shoutouts to my patrons. A special thanks to La Creatura for pledging to the highest tier too. You guys are absolute legends, and I can't thank you enough for your contributions. And I'll catch ya in the next one.